Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week is Kate Stotler. Kate is running as a Republican for Morgan County Clerk, and she'll be on the ballot May 10th. If you want to vote in this election, if you're a Republican, you can. If you're not affiliated, you have to choose the Republican primary ballot to vote. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kate, you were born where, and what was the work of your parents?
I was born in Bermuda, as a matter of fact, out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. My dad is a career naval officer. He's retired now, but he was a Navy pilot for his entire career. And they were stationed in Bermuda, and he was flying boats, if you're familiar. I know that sounds like a strange term, but that's what he was flying in Bermuda, and I just happened to be born when they were stationed there.
What brought you here?
Oh, well, I lived in the Northern Virginia area until 1992 with my family, and I always knew that I wanted to end up in a small town. I really wanted to raise my two sons in a small town. And we came one weekend, actually, and we really liked Berkeley Springs, and we were here on weekends for about 4 years, probably, and weekends were not enough after a while. And so I'm one of the people in Morgan County who is here by choice, because there is no place on earth I would rather be.
Now, you are a civics teacher at the high school.
Correct.
So let me ask you a civics question.
Okay.
Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
So how did that happen?
Yes.
You weren't born as a U.S. citizen, were you?
I was born with dual citizenship, and the reason for that is because my father was a U.S. naval officer. Both of my parents were American citizens, and so sometimes people ask, about the whole natural born thing, as it indicates in the Constitution. I had dual citizenship, both American and British citizenship. When I became of age, I had to choose between the two, and since I had never lived in England, and since I was pretty happy where I was, I became only an American citizen at that point.
All right, another civics question. I want you to weigh in on this.
Okay.
This is your first public run for office.
Correct.
If you eventually start climbing the ladder and run for president, can you serve as president being born in Bermuda?
Well, actually, there is a case going on, several cases around the country right now, questioning the same thing as regards to Ted Cruz, who, as you may know, was born in Canada. And there is another candidate who is questioning whether or not constitutionally he's allowed to serve in public office. The state of Pennsylvania has already made their decision, and they've said he is constitutionally qualified because he had one American parent, even though he was born in Canada. In the state of New Jersey, that case is pending right now, and the court is going to be making that decision here shortly.
So what's your position? If you ran for president, should you be allowed to serve if you want?
Well, first of all, I don't know why anybody would ever want that job in the first place, so you're never going to see me doing that right off the top. But from a civics teacher's point of view, given the precedent that was set long ago and the understanding, even though it's never been ruled on by the United States Supreme Court, I would say that as long as you have one American citizen who is your parent, then you would be considered a natural-born citizen. The Founding Fathers really never mapped that out or said specifically what it meant to be a natural-born citizen. That's what the courts are going to decide.
When did you start teaching at Berkeley Springs High School, and what have you been teaching?
Okay. Back in 2003, George Ward, who was the principal at the time, called me about a week before school started because one of Lance Fox, who had just been promoted at the time to be the assistant principal, had been teaching social studies, and they needed a world history teacher, and eventually they knew they were going to need a government teacher because the state of West Virginia was going back to making it mandatory for students to have to pass civics class to graduate. And so a couple of years into my teaching at the high school, that did become mandatory. I'm reminding all my seniors right now who are very anxious to graduate and get out, you do have to pass my class to get out of here. And I became the civics teacher. I also teach AP US government, United States government, and then I also teach a great class that we really enjoy. It's called AP comparative government, where after they've become very well versed in American government, then we go on to look at different political systems around the world. And since our kids these days, it's not like when you and I went out into the world where we didn't have to compete with people from India and China and around the world. These kids do, and they need some background on the way other political systems work around the world. And so I was very, very glad when we instituted this as part of our curriculum. This is the third time I've taught AP Comparative Government. It just gets better and better every time.
And your reputation is one of a great civics teacher. I must say, we had a couple
Thank
kids in
you.
your classes and so forth, and people really like you. And Pete Gordon, who's also running,
Right.
who's running for school board. And I'm wondering your thoughts on, well, if you win this race for county clerk, you will leave the school system.
I will have to, because it is a full-time position, and I intend to be a full-time county clerk.
And if you and, well, Pete has retired, but I mean, that's two of the top teachers at Berkeley Springs High School potentially leaving. And your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody is irreplaceable. I have to say that Pete Gordon was an outstanding math teacher, and also imparted an awful lot of other things like values and philosophy and music, love of music when he was there. So he certainly was a big loss. I think, though, that there are an awful lot of people in our community that we don't always tap the talents that we have in our community. We have an awful lot of folks who've retired from the federal government and come here, and they have these incredible areas of expertise. I think we're going to be able to find somebody, particularly for the AP Comparative Government class, who might have some expertise that I don't even have. So I look forward to, if I am to be successful on May 10th, finding just the right person to take over when I leave in December.
What made you decide to run for public office?
I have worked in politics for many, many years. I've helped an awful lot of candidates over the years at the national, state, and local levels get elected to various offices. And honestly, I never really thought I was going to run for office myself. And I've been teaching government for a lot of years now as well, helping Berkeley Springs High School students to become responsible, engaged, participating citizens. And about a year ago, I started to think about it, and I thought, this is something maybe I'm supposed to go do. I feel like I'm very well versed in government. I know basically everybody in the courthouse and how the county government works and that sort of thing. I think I bring a real big picture view to the county government. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees, and I think sometimes we need that, and maybe an outsider to come in and help bring that back.
What is the job of the county clerk, and how do you think you would do it differently or better than your opponent or the current county clerk?
It's actually a job that people don't know very much about. I get asked that all the time, and in some ways it's kind of the hub of county government, in that they keep all the records for the county: birth records and death records, marriage records, real estate transactions. It is the county clerk's office that keeps the history, really. And as a history teacher, that part of the job really appeals to me. If you've ever been into the courthouse, the record room, and looked at some of those beautiful old record books that we have, the whole history of our county is there. So they keep all the records. They also are the office that register voters in Morgan County. They conduct elections. They pay the county's bills. They help the county commission monitor the budget so that spending stays on track. They probate estates. I mean, the entire lives of citizens of Morgan County, from literally birth to death, are recorded, and transactions take place right there in the county clerk's office. And one of the things that I would like to do differently, perhaps if I win, is I don't think citizens have any idea what the county clerk's office does. One of the things I think I bring to the office is I've been very, very involved in the community, an active volunteer. I was very involved in the levy campaign. I'm out there on a really daily basis in the community and being in touch with people. And in that capacity, I would like to be out there as a sort of a liaison and a speaker at the Rotary Club and the Lions Club and the auxiliaries in town. Anybody who will let me come and talk about the county clerk's office and the kinds of services that we offer to Morgan County citizens, and to be, once they understand what the county clerk's office does, to be able to listen in return. What kinds of experiences have you had there that were not terribly successful? What do we need to do better to make your life a little bit easier as a citizen of Morgan County?
You would move the classroom from the high school to the community?
Yes,
you become the
absolutely.
civic teacher at large?
Yes, and I think we all need to be lifelong learners, whether we're 85 or 17, like most of my students are. I think that there is a really vitally important role for the county clerk to play in that regard.
Historically, you mentioned voter registration. Historically, turnout in elections has been low.
Very low.
Registration has been low, not as low as turnout, but low. Some countries, as you know, have mandatory voting, similar to mandatory jury duty, where you would get the opportunity to vote for none of the above or write in someone. So you're not being forced to vote for someone on the ballot, but you can choose. What do you think about that?
I think that's a real mixed bag. Let me just back up a little bit to something you said, just to provide some evidence that voter turnout does tend to be very low. Unfortunately, in West Virginia, in 2012, in the presidential election, West Virginia had the second lowest voter turnout in the entire country. And in 2008, we had the dead lowest voter turnout. That's not the kind of list that we want to be on. And so as another role I see the county clerk playing is to make sure that our citizens understand why it is so important to participate actively in democracy by voting. I don't want to be on that list where we're down there at the bottom. We need to do our part to strengthen democracy, so I would want to try and find ways to help citizens feel that voting was important and that it was convenient and easy for them to do so. As far as mandatory voting, I think on balance there's arguments for and against it. It's one of the discussions that we have in my government class every single year. I think that I come down probably though on the side of not making it mandatory, and part of that would be because I think that when people are forced to do something and they know, for instance, that they're going to be penalized if they don't turn out to vote, they say, fine, I'll go do it, but I'm not even going to look and see who, I'm not going to be informed, I'm just going to do it because otherwise I'm going to have to pay some sort of penalty. And then we end up electing people who just maybe aren't even fit to take office. And so I think on balance, even though it certainly would improve voter turnout and be more democratic, small d, as in democracy, I think on balance it probably would be more damaging for our political system.
How does it differ from jury duty? We're required under penalty of law to serve on juries. How do you think it differs from that?
Well, certainly it has some things in common. People don't like to be forced to do anything. But I feel that the whole concept of a jury of your peers is important. If we only have the people serving jury duty who don't have to work, as an example, what you get are people who are independently wealthy and are not necessarily a jury of your peers. They're people who may not understand the average person's problems and might make decisions that would be prejudicial. So I feel really strongly that jury duty is a responsibility of every citizen. It's sort of the ultimate expression, maybe besides voting, of democracy. It's very important. I'm not really sure why I feel that those two things are different. I guess I'm concerned about the results that would be produced if people were forced to vote.
You are running as a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe your politics?
Well, let me say this. In the case of the county clerk's office, it's an administrative position and not a policy-making position. And so the typical issues that you would hear about in the presidential elections or congressional elections or the gubernatorial elections don't really apply in this case. There isn't going to be discussion of issues. I would say that I am a pragmatist more than anything else. I think that we need to be following the law. We need to be running an efficient office. We need to make sure that the public is served in the county clerk's office, and that we need to do everything that we can to make that happen. It's not really an ideological position, and so as far as the county clerk's office goes, that kind of discussion isn't even part of the job.
Correct. Though you are running as a Republican, and there's another Republican, and there's no Democrat. Mm-hmm. And given that it's non-ideological, mm-hmm. as you put it, mm-hmm. shouldn't it be a nonpartisan election similar to the Board of Education?
Well, it isn't, because the West Virginia Constitution says that it's an elected position. And I guess you could take the point of view that anytime you can elect your government officials, that makes the process more democratic because more people have a say as to who is in that job. But as far as it being nonpartisan, I think that's a possibility. We are moving in that direction. The state legislature, as you mentioned, has gone this year and made all the judicial offices nonpartisan. Our school board offices are all nonpartisan. Because this is an administrative position, in some ways it may make more sense to make it not be a partisan race.
And then back to the politics. As a teacher, I mean, I never heard any students who I talked to about your class, and they, as I said, you get very high grades.
Thank you.
Talk about you showing any kind of partisanship in class. But what's the story on civics teachers generally? Because it's hard to hide how you feel about politics.
Very.
So how did you deal with that?
Yeah, that's one of the things I feel the most strongly about. My attitude is it's not my job to teach those kids what to think. It is my job to teach them how to think. And so I make sure always to do my very best to hide my personal biases. I have opinions on issues, but we play kind of a game in class. They're always asking me, what do you think about this? And I try very hard not to show that. I want them to look at this side of the coin. I want them to look at this side of the coin and whatever other sides there are, and then do their thinking for themselves and make their own decision. And oftentimes I'll start an argument and they'll think I'm on that side. And as soon as I get some kids participating, I'll go around and argue the other side because I want to make sure that it's their choice in the end. I don't want to do their thinking for them. I don't want anybody to do their thinking for them. They need to learn to do it for themselves because that's what they're going to have to do as responsible citizens here in Morgan County or wherever they go.
When I went to public school, in Niagara Falls, New York, and civics was mandatory as a third grade class.
Good for them.
And do you remember that? Oh,
it wasn't in my school, but I think I have a bit of a bias on that too. I don't see why we don't start, and we do start kids at a much earlier age. Right now, they take it as a senior in high school, and there's good reasons for that too. It's sequential. They've had an awful lot of history background by the time to get to me, and then they can apply it in government class. But that doesn't mean we have to wait until they're 17 or 18 years old to be taking civics.
We got your flyer in the mail on Saturday, and one of the things you say is that you will not play favorites. When I saw that, I thought, is she saying that the current county clerk plays favorites, or what do you mean by that?
You might know that Debbie Kiesecker has been the county clerk for many years and has served this county very well. But what I think is that, and I think this is the defining issue, if there is one, in this race. Because Debbie was a very, very long time leader, often when we get to the end of one person's leadership, it's important that we step back and look at the office as a whole and have somebody who can take a really hard objective look, have a fresh perspective. And I think it's very difficult for somebody who is already in the system, who is entrenched in office politics and has friendships and relationships and doesn't want to come in and trample on long-held traditions that we've been doing it for a long time. But if the goal of the office is to be as efficient, as effective as we can be for Morgan County citizens, sometimes after a long period of time under one leader, it's important for somebody to come in and make the changes that will create that efficiency and that effectiveness. And so when I talk about favorites, I think what my reference is to making sure that we're making decisions based on what is best for Morgan County citizens and not what is convenient for people in the courthouse. And
people in the courthouse, if you win, will be working for you. At least 6 of them, I believe. 5 people. Okay. And
6 including the clerk.
6 including the clerk. And one of those people will be your opponent. So let's assume you win, and then you are your opponent's boss, effectively.
Correct.
So the question is, are you going to clean house and bring in your own people?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm a pragmatic politician. I would say that it's not the individuals in particular. I think that what needs to be done is, I would say, if you can be professional, if you can be courteous to Morgan County residents, if you can play by the rules in this office, if you can do your job, then that's what we want in our employees. These little petty personal, dramas that go on in office politics sometimes, that doesn't have any place in what I want to do. If people can live by those rules, then I want them to stay. I want them to be on the staff because they bring a lot of experience with them. And so if people can play by those rules, then great. I'd love to have them stay.
You mentioned the school levy and the vote, and the county was sort of torn apart by the school levy. There were debates both sides. You were active in pushing for the school levy. And I'm wondering your thoughts on, as county clerk, if you're elected, will you be able to take public positions on local politics?
I think it becomes a lot more difficult at that point. You don't ever want to be in a position to be getting into the business of other elected officials and trampling on their toes and that sort of thing. I think it's a case-by-case basis. I certainly want to stay involved in the community. Schools will always be my passion, whether I'm an employee of the school system or not. But I think you have to make sure you don't go over the line of, as an elected official, interfering in the realm or the area of other elected officials in this county.
Okay. And we have just a couple minutes left, okay. But on the question of salary, I think the county clerk gets paid $40,000 or so, something like that.
I believe it's a bit more than that.
Okay. And is this going to be a pay cut for you?
Not based on the information I have about salary.
Okay, so it'll actually be a pay raise.
Yes, to an extent, although not a huge one, and that certainly isn't the reason that I'm doing it in the first place.
On teacher salaries, because and this doesn't have to do with the county clerk, but I want your input on this. There's the discussion that teachers in neighboring states make more, and that hurts our education system. What can be done about it?
That's a tough one. That's something for the school board candidates, for sure. That's been a problem in this area for a long time. We have people come here, they start out in Morgan County, and we'd really like to keep them. And a lot of times, if they don't have roots in the community, they do end up going on. If they go right over 6 miles into Maryland, into Washington County, they can get a big hefty pay raise. They can get an even bigger one if they go to Virginia or Pennsylvania. We're really in a difficult spot geographically. And we're also in real budget difficulties in this state. We're taking all kinds of budget cuts in the school system. That's a really tricky one. I think we have to find, at least in the short run, ways to incentivize people to come here and stay here. I'm not sure exactly what those incentives are, but we have got to get real creative on that, because every year we just hemorrhage teachers who we just really like to keep in Morgan County. If we're going to train them, if we're going to go to the trouble to invest in them, we want to be in a position to keep them.
Okay, this is your first run.
Yes.
And you've been campaigning all over the county.
Oh, yes.
How's it been going, and how does it compare to teaching?
Well, I would say the way that they're the same is it is a lot of hard work. Teaching so far is the hardest job I have ever had. The kids in my classes for years have teased me. The rumor in school is that I keep a sleeping bag in my closet, because sometimes they'll come back to school for sports practice or whatever, and it's getting dark and the light's still on in my classroom. So I spend an awful lot of time in there, and my attitude about any job I've ever had, and I've had a lot of different ones, has always been, you work till you get the job done. I expect to do that as a county clerk also, but campaigning to get that office is like that as well. And here's a point that I think is pretty important. I don't think anybody is entitled to this job. Neither me nor my opponent is entitled to this position. I think that you have to show the residents of Morgan County that you're willing to get out there and work for this job. And that's why I've spent the whole campaign knocking on people's doors and meeting them for the first time. I go to any event in this county I can find that has more than 3 people at it, so that I can meet them and hear their concerns, and they can get to know me a little bit. I don't know if you saw me or not, but last week I was standing on the street waving my sign and waving to people as they drove by. And I think all those kinds of things are extremely important so that people can see that you are willing to work for your job and you don't just expect somebody to hand it to you because you're somehow entitled to it.
Well, good luck on May 10th.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on your run.
Thank you. I'm having fun.
Good. And thank you for watching This Week in Morgan County.